Hello, you wonderful people. Today I want to talk about my thought process of development and what does it mean for me and how am I keeping myself on track to continue to learn the things that I need to do to stand out as the best developer that I can be, which I'm not, but I'm going to keep trying. And here I am in my magical apartment covering my mess behind my house, which is perfectly fine. That's the power of green screen, but enough about hiding my mess of my empty wall behind me. Let's jump right into it and go. So I've been thinking about my coding journey, and this is what I want to continue to focus on. So as a developer, you do need to have some sort of structured path that keeps you guided along the way. And for me, having ADHD, that's such an impossible task because I find myself just going down every rabbit hole that I find. And so for me, I really thought about it. What do I want to do? And so I want to focus on the principles of coding. And so I decided to limit myself to certain languages. I'm not saying that I'm not going to try Go once in a while or what have you, but as a base, this is what I've decided. So taking a look at this roadmap that I'm going to show you, I'm not saying that you should follow it, but as I was learning to code back in the day, let me zoom in a little bit. Back in the day, before I even knew I was going to be a developer, I got a C programming book. And the reason why I got it is because it didn't all start with C, but C is one of those fundamental languages of programming that back in the day, that's where everybody started. And I think for historical purposes and to learn programming basics, I really believe everybody should do at least one course of C. I'm not saying that you have to or to do those things in this order, but I think to me, going to the roots of programming in a reasonable way, programming in C is a way for me to do it. So I'm not going to be building C applications, but I think trying to do things like build a simple terminal program with C, then figure out how do you interact with the web with C. And I'm not saying these are all the exercises that you have to do all at once, but the idea is to kind of give you a different avenue to explore programming in a much more simple language where a lot of the things you have to do yourself. Moving from C or the basic concepts of programming, and this is probably where I actually recommend you start. I'm not saying you should start with C, but CS50 starts with their journey with C programming language. But the next thing I want to continue to focus is the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This could literally be a whole lifelong pursuit. Regardless who you talk to, the web will always have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I think it's important for us to actually spend some time in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is counterproductive. What I used to tell people, spend as little time as you can. And actually, to be honest, when you're learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for the first time, spend as little time as possible so you could get to a point where you're learning a framework and could build cool things with the framework. But once you get that taste, once you understand that frameworks make things easier, once you're able to build cool apps with production, I think you should always take a back step and work on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript basic. More importantly, JavaScript basics to a point where you should constantly focus on improving your JavaScript understanding. And again, this is going to be a lifelong goal. I'm not saying this is something that you have to do right now, but as you take 5 steps forward in your coding journey, always come back to the basics, the fundamentals, the basic principles of your core programming languages. For me, it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You should be able to build simple websites with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but then you should also be able to not only work with JavaScript from the standpoint of how you manipulate the DOM, but also getting into Node, which I'm going to talk a little bit farther. Once you get the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you're kind of tired of doing projects from scratch with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, this is where I really love Astro. Astro is one of my favorite frameworks, and you could use it in so many amazing ways with React, with Vue, what have you. I only use Astro when someone tells me, Paul, I need you to build me a simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript website. Astro makes writing HTML and CSS, JavaScript a joy. I really recommend it. I love it so much. And so, if someone said to me, if I only know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you could easily pick up Astro and you could build 90% of all the corporate business websites that you see out there. So you could actually become very productive with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Astro. So to me, it has a very special place in my heart. And this is something that if I want to write vanilla JavaScript, I'm going to do it with Astro. Next, you get the basic understanding of your front-end technology. So now you want to go into backend. Some people will go to Python. Some people will go to PHP. Some people will go to C#. Some people will go to Go. And for me, I'm like, I just spent a bunch of time learning JavaScript. Why complicate things to learn another language if I could jump in and build backend APIs with Node.js? And you learn a lot of cool things by interacting with Node. You're still in one programming language. And what's awesome about it, once you dive deeper into Node.js, you realize it's a way for us to do cool things without doing C++ because Node.js does that for us. It calls C++ routines to accomplish certain things that Node just can't do without those routines. And so I think try to stick in one language and to go as far and deep as you can. Learning Node.js to me makes perfect sense. And regardless what framework you decide to use, Express, there's Koa, there's a bunch of other ones. For me, understand just the core of Node. That's a good place to spend a lot of time. Next, when you're working with backend and you start to focus on building full stack applications, I think everybody as a developer should at least understand the basic of working with databases. You want to start, forget MongoDB, forget Firebase. You want to start focusing on SQL-like database, MariaDB, SQL. Who cares? SQLite. I really prefer Postgres, very awesome database that I've used in many projects. And you want to learn to talk to the database through a tool like DVBeaver or my pgadmin or whatever the heck tool you choose to be able to interact with a database using SQL query language. It really will help you to understand what's going on under the hood. And by just focusing on the database, you're going to start to learn how data is represented in your application. Once you get the basic understanding of SQL, you could find an ORM like Drizzle or Prisma, and now you could build like cool backend projects. But when you're building those projects, you're not lost when you get a weird error that you realize it's actually not in your code, but the error is actually in your database. And sometimes you get too many of these errors by too many stupid things that you've done. You might break your database and you actually have to manually go and fix things using SQL. And that's something that a lot of beginners get caught up when they get excited. They build something cool and all of a sudden they get an issue on a database level and they literally like, I am screwed. And if you didn't back up your database, oh man, that's terrible. And so understanding basic migrations, understanding how to work with databases, this is like the part that I'm still learning because I think as a full stack developer, this is the piece that you really have to understand. And by understanding SQL, Node.js, understanding HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you have the building blocks to build majority of the projects. But you will find out that building things from scratch, sometimes on that basic level in terms of the language that you're using, you will start to find that for certain things, you need to understand basic build tools. And so for me, this is another place that I really suck. So the process of learning ESBuild, learning Vite, and I think I'm going to stick with Vite. Don't go too crazy. I think ESBuild and Vite are perfect enough. Just pick one to start with and kind of understand how those builders tools use and what problem they solve. And a lot of times, a lot of this stuff is obfuscated from us because of you using frameworks. And again, when you're starting out, you don't have to master any one of these, right? I don't have to wait until I master the C language to start or basic programming concepts in C before going to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The idea is learn just enough to move to the next step, learn just enough to move to the next step, learn just enough to move to the next step, learn just enough to move to the next step. If you feel like you reach your limit and you're like, God damn it, I can't do it anymore, take a few steps back. Take a few steps back, and do it again. Go through that process of learning, experimenting, and go move forward. So 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. You have your whole life time to do this stuff. But the idea is to understand the basics and really get comfortable with the basic building blocks of the web is super important. Once you get a basic understanding of build tools, next you move on to a full stack framework like Next.js or Remix. Don't have to do all of them. Pick one, maybe two at most. And your goal is to understand what problem that framework solves. And one example I'm going to give you, when you start building with a framework, this is also another place that I find myself, you use something like Next.js, you use something like Remix that are doing server-side React, and you're getting all the benefits. But if someone kind of asks you, do you kind of know how that works? Do you understand what is happening under the hood? And if you find yourself like me that can't answer that question, you do need to give yourself some time to take a little step back. Go to your Node.js and React and the basic build tools and how you could bundle things together, and understand that those frameworks do some magic under the hood to give you that functionality. But if you really think about it, those are built with the basic building blocks, React, Node.js, or some sort of server-side language, talking to the database, and again, work your way back up. So what we really want to discourage ourselves, and this is something that I'm always stuck, I'm just being honest with you, is trusting the magic of our frameworks to a point where if the framework didn't exist, you wouldn't be able to do anything. And so after that, we are in 2024, AI hype is up the butt. So understanding how AI systems work on the most basic level from the standpoint of kind of understanding the basics, and something that I try to do is with every project I build, implement some sort of AI functionality, even though if it's tiny. You could get far with just JavaScript and TypeScript. And one thing that I did not add here, I'm going to do it in real time. So right before here, as you do full stack frameworks and Next.js, and this is something that I did forget, this is all on me, but I'll fix it very quickly here. Take this line, add it here, take this, duplicate. And one thing that's important, everybody needs to know TypeScript. Very important. I don't even understand how I forgot about it. I didn't. It's a necessary evil, and it's not evil, it's important. So understanding TypeScript. And you could start learning TypeScript when you start using Next.js and Remix. Like some people will start learning it earlier, but no rush. Once you get to a framework, most frameworks now, they start with TypeScript, so you have no option. And what's cool about TypeScript, you could learn it incrementally. And this is something that I've been doing. I'm not a TypeScript expert, but I've been working everything TypeScript projects, and I'm learning TypeScript incrementally as I go along. But back to this example. The world of AI, you're going to have to interact with AI system. And here I have Python. The goal for me is not to master Python and be a Python developer building full stack applications. My goal with Python is to understand enough Python scripting where I could interact with all the cool AI libraries to accomplish the things that I need. And if there's something missing, I could look it up. In worst case scenario, if there's something that I need that I can't do with TypeScript and JavaScript, and I need to call some sort of library that utilizes Python, at least know enough Python to quickly create a API with Flask or Fast API, whatever the hell the libraries are, and to be able to interact with that AI system, to be able to get the data that you need to use in your application. And after that, right, I'm not gonna be a data scientist. I'm not smart enough. I'm not gonna be working on those hard problems that folks in OpenAI work where they make $500,000 a year. But you should understand basics of AI, like limitations of AI, so you don't get lost in the hype, and how to build these RAG systems where you just combine a bunch of AI tasks like the chat with text embeddings to make something useful that you can use. And now we come to advanced programming, continue to learn algorithms and data structures. So this is another thing that I didn't put here. So once you get to a point where you're building cool stuff, you're able to build cool things with Next.js and Remix, you know TypeScript, maybe here, let me move this a little bit. and maybe you could start it a little bit earlier. But I would say once you know how to build something, and again, this is not in every crazy order, but starting to spend some times on data structures and algorithms, so I'm not even going to attempt to try it, is very important. And this kind of comes back to my last point here is, why did I decide as my all get to, because at the end of the day, I don't want to be like the C++ programmer that does everything with C++, but it's a language that is part of everything that you already do. I'm not saying that my goal is to learn C++, but I want to understand enough C and enough C++ to kind of understand where the language fits in and to learn more about some of the advanced programming concepts. And one of the reasons why I started with C, my initial journey, and I actually took a course in C++ in college before I dropped out, is the fact that JavaScript was originally written with C and then C++, Node under the hood called C++ routines. So me in the ecosystem that I'm in with development, this makes perfect sense because I'm literally using stuff that was written with C and C++. And I'm talking about JavaScript, and Node when in Chrome. And so the reason why I picked this roadmap for myself is because this gives me a guiding star to do the things that I feel are important. And there are certain things that are not on this list, like DevOps. I don't care about DevOps. It's not something that I want to do. And is this a perfect outline? No, but it's kind of like my guiding star that keeps me on track. Yeah, I could take a little detour here and there, but for the most of my journey, this is the thing that I'm going to do. And the reason why I picked this path is one thing that I noticed. I've worked with a bunch of C++ developers, and some of them are so elitist, but one thing that they're able to do, they're able to take any other language and learn it very easily. And so to summarize is that the things that I'm going to focus throughout my career, and of course this list could change, but as my guiding principles that I'm going to continue to structure all my learning around is going to be around these things. And again, when I talked about that's few steps forward, few steps back, you're not trying to master everything at once. You're just spending some time, little here, little there, but your overall goal, as you could see here, based on this list, you could still see that I'm overall a web developer focusing on getting to full stack development through HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node.js, SQL, query language, using RMs and build tools, and TypeScript. That's my main thing. And for libraries, anything that's for static build websites with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, Astro is my go-to. And for full stack frameworks, Remix is kind of now React Router 7. So it's actually just going to be React. So we could probably delete this because it's going to be React Router 7. Maybe one day Remix 3 will come out. But my only framework that I'm going to spend any time on is going to be Next.js. I'm going to keep Remix though, because I like Remix. And if I have to use Remix 2 for as long as I can, or use React Router 7, I'm going to continue to do that as long as I live. And so here to just review, this is my roadmap. I spelled data structures wrong. Apparently it's 2 words. Who knew? But basically this is my guiding principle for the things that I want to do as a developer. And I forgot to put C here. How come I didn't put C here? And I am going to do that. I'm going to put C here. Wait, that's not what I wanted to do. Get back. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. And C is going to be step 0. Step 0. My keyboard had to wake up. C, the OG. And so I'm not saying that you have to learn all these things. This is how I'm thinking about programming. This is what I'm working on as a guiding principle. I'm not saying that I can't diverge here or there, but for me, this type of roadmap, this idea, like focusing on the basics, having one full stack framework, but giving myself a path to pursue some advanced concept. And again, for you to learn C++, is it an overkill? Most likely it is, but the But the craziest thing I heard this dude, he's like, yeah, I was working on Node.js project and it wasn't doing the thing that I wanted to do. So I wrote the thing for myself using C++ that's consumed by Node.js. And I was like, you know what? You're an OG developer. He was like in his 50s. And I was like, you know what? That obviously makes sense. And I kind of get the like inspiration from the old school developers who have gray hair now. They're like in their 70s and, you know, they're just living wild, you know, whatever the hell they do in that age. Yeah. And so for me, this is kind of my path. And the last thing before I go, listening to like those old school developers or learning from others is very important. So I'm going to recommend 3 books, and 2 of the books are very, as you will say, divisive depending who you talk to. But the first book, this is more about like career advancement. It's called Pragmatic Programmer. And I think this is just good when you're just starting out your journey. A lot of cool stuff to read, or from historical standpoint of, hey, this was just an amazing book that was written very long time ago. But this is really cool book just to give you a general like outline of what your career as a developer looks like and what step you are on. The next 2 books, people just complain about them, and I'm going to give you my view why people might complain about them. But it's Clean Code by Robert Martin, or Uncle Bob, and he has another book called Clean Architecture. That's something web dev Cody talked about, and something he mentioned is what they use as one of the guiding principles at the job that he works. Now, some people will say these books are controversial because what does Uncle Bob know? But here's the thing. The only people that are complaining about these books, and they're not really complaining them, they have few points that they just disagree with. Like Primogen disagrees with some of the points with Uncle Bob, but he had him on and they agreed on a lot more things that they disagree. So if you're just starting out and you don't have like a good approach to patterns, you're not sure kind of what some things you should strive to or how to organize your code, you need to have some semblance of some sort of like guiding principles or patterns that you could follow. And then once you follow them, you could now have place from which you could be like, I agree with this or I don't agree with this. But if you're just starting out and if you have no idea for any guiding principles, starting with something like clean code and clean architecture is a very, very good place and good approach to do. And the last thing that I'm going to say, and this is just something I bought, this is not something I study, this is not something I go crazy with, but I do have this data structures and algorithm book. And again, I don't use it to study like every night like this. I just use it once in a while to take a look, to kind of move my brain muscles and explore some of the different algorithm and structures. And if I were preparing for the interview that I knew would have a bunch of whiteboarding stuff, you know it, I'm going to be in this like coffee and cupcakes. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. That's very terrible. But you know, I'll be in the book, nose in the book, studying. So with that being said, I just wanted to make this video to kind of, a lot of times I make videos and people, well, what the hell, how's Paul thinking about this? Where is he coming from? So I want to share like my journey to kind of showcase like, this is how I'm thinking about things. And this is what resources I'm using. And this is what my guiding path to development is. And the biggest takeaway from this video is that you have to find what that path is for you and to understand that even though there's a lot of cool tools that are shiny and awesome, which I love to use, and I probably overuse them to a point where I probably can't write vanilla JavaScript anymore, but you need to be able to take a step back and focus on like the core principles and understand, you know, on the most basic level how code works, so you could then learn the advanced stuff much more easier. So anyway, let me know if you like this video or not. I don't care. I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you for checking out the channel and the video. I love you all. I will see you later. Bye, everyone.